Today I want to talk about something that almost no one in the legal world talks about. Not the law, not the Hague Convention itself, not the court hearings. I want to talk about what happens inside the mind of a father whose child has been taken to Brazil. Because in the years I have spent in handling international parental abduction cases, I have noticed something that goes far beyond the legal file. The men who come to me, not only men, but most of them men, arrive in a specific psychological state, a state that is recognizable, almost predictable, and almost never named correctly. They are not just sad, they are not just angry, they are not just lonely. What they are experiencing has a shape, a sequence, a logic, and if they do not understand that shape, it will be used against them in court, in negotiations, and in their own heads. So today I want to go there. I want to talk about the psychological of the left behind parent, what they feel, what they think, what traps they fall into, and I also want to talk about something most of the people are afraid to say out loud, the psychology profile of the parent who takes the child in the first place. Because these cases do not happen randomly. There are patterns, there are warning signs. In almost all the cases that I have handled, the signs are there before the abduction even happened. The first thing a left behind father typically feels is not what he expects to feel. He expects to feel grief. And grief is there, but it's a specific disorientating kind of grief that psychologically is called ambiguous loss. Pauline Boss, the researcher who named this concept, described it as the most difficult form of loss a human being can experience. It is a grief without closure, a grief without a body, without a ceremony, without an ending. Your child is not dead. They are alive somewhere. You know they are breathing, probably laughing, probably asking where you are, and yet they are completely unaware, untouchable. That combination, presence and absence at the same time, creates a psychological state that the brain does not know how to process. The normal mechanism of grief do not engage. You cannot mourn someone who's still alive. You cannot accept a loss that it's not final. So the mind gets stuck into a loop. The second thing that he feels is hypervigilance. His phone became as an extension of his nervous system. Every message, notification, every unknown number, every mail could be news about his child. He checks social media obsessively, looking for a photo, a location, tag, a comment from someone who has seen his child. He reads into everything. He sleeps poorly or not at all. His body is in a stage of chronic fight or flight. This is not neurosis. This is a rational response to a genuine threatening situation, but it is also exhausting. And over time, if not recognized, it becomes debilitating. The third thing, and this is one of the almost no one talk about, is shame. There is a profound shame in being a left behind father. A shame that says, if you were good enough father, this would not have happened. If you had been more present, more attentive, less confrontational, less passive, choose your version. She would not have taken your child. You should have seen it coming. You should have prevented it. That shame is not rational, but it is almost universal in the men I work with. And it is dangerous. Because shame makes people go quiet. It makes them hesitate to tell their story. It makes them second guess their own perception of the events. And it makes them vulnerable to the narrative of the other side that they are already building about them. The mind of a left behind father in the acute phase of an abduction follows a very specific pattern of thoughts. I have heard versions of the same sentence in consultation room after consultation room. The first thought pattern is reconstructive obsession. He replays the relationship constantly, looking for the moment it broke, looking for what he missed, looking for the exact conversation, the exact decision, the exact day when the trajectory toward abduction began. He believes that if he can find the precise origin point, it he can understand it. And if he can understand it, he can somehow undo it, or at least prevent it from happening again. This is not a useful thing. It consumes enormous psychological energy and produces nothing actionable, but it is nearly impossible to stop without deliberate intervention. The second pattern is what I would call justice fixation. He becomes consumed by the idea that what happened is wrong, morally, legally, humanly wrong, and that this wrongfulness, if sufficiently demonstrated, will produce a proportionate response from the legal system. He believes, on some level, that the courts will see what he sees, that the judge will recognize the injustice and act swiftly to correct it. This belief is understandable, but it sets him up for a profound disappointment, because the legal system, including Hague proceedings, does not operate on the logic of moral clarity. It operates on the logic of evidence, procedure, jurisdiction, and competing interests. A case that feels absolutely clear to a left-behind father can spend years in court, and every procedural delay feels like the system failing him personally. The third pattern is magical thinking about the other parent. Despite everything, despite the removal, despite the legal battle, despite the allegation, many left-behind parents hold a persistent, irrational hope that the mother will come to her senses, that she will call, that she will agree to come back, that the version of her he once loved is still accessible somewhere underneath what she has become. This is not weakness. It is a completely human response to losing a relationship and a child at the same time. But it is also the hope that the other side exploits, because a father waiting for a phone call that will never come is a father who is not filling legal papers. If you are in this situation, there are several things I want you to hold in your mind, not as legal advice, but as a psychological orientation. The first is this: your emotional state is a legal variable. I know that sounds cold, but in a Hague proceeding or in any international custody case, how you present yourself matters enormously. A judge observing a parent who appears unstable, vindictive, or obsessive will not feel confident sending a child back to that environment, regardless of what the law technically requires. The other side knows that. They may in fact be deliberately provoking you to produce that reaction. The anger you feel is legit, every part of it, but it cannot be the face you put in front of a court. The second, document everything, but do not engage everything. Document every failed attempt to reach your child. Save every message, every missed call, every blocked contact. This is evidence of parental alienation, and it's highly relevant in court. But do not respond to every provocation. Do not send aggressive messages. Do not say anything in written that you would not want a judge to read that out loud in a hearing, because her lawyer will use it. The third, stop negotiating directly. I understand the impulse. You want to resolve things between yourselves without courts and lawyers and costs and delays. But in a case where a parent has unilaterally removed a child across an international border, the conditions for a fair, direct negotiation no longer exists. You are not negotiating from equal position. You are not negotiating as the person with everything to lose, opposite someone who has already demonstrated that they will act unilaterally when they choose to. Any agreement reached outside of a legal framework is only as reliable as the person who made it. And this person has already shown you exactly how reliable they are. The fourth, and perhaps the most important, psychologically, get help. This is not legal. A therapist, a support group for left-behind parents, a trusted person who can hear the full weight of what you are carrying without advising you on jurisdiction. The legal battle is necessary, but it runs in parallel to a psychological battle that is equally real and equally demanding. And you cannot win the legal one if the psychological one is destroying you from the inside. Now, I want to talk about something that requires care and precision, because I'm not a psychiatrist, and what I'm about to describe is a pattern I have observed across many cases, not a clinical diagnosis. But in the years I have handled these cases, a profile has emerged, not universal, not without exceptions, but consistent enough to describe the parent who commits international parental abduction, who takes a child across a border without consent, breaks the law of multiple countries, and severs a child from one parent, is rarely acting on a single impulse. The act is usually the culmination of a long psychological process. And when I look back at the case's histories, the warning signs were almost always there. The first cluster of characteristics involve what psychologists would broadly categorize as difficulty with loss of control. These are individuals who find the dissolution of a relationship, particularly when initiated by the other party, psychologically intolerable. Not simply painful, which is normal, intolerable. The end of the relationship is experienced not as a loss, but as an attack, a humiliation, an injustice that demands a response proportionate to the perceiving wound. Taking the child is, in the psychological logic, the ultimate response. It restores a sense of power and control. It punishes the other parent in the most devastating way possible. And it carries a narrative that can be dressed in the language of protection. I took the child because I had to protect them. The abduction is rationalized, sometimes sincerely, as an act of love. The second cluster involves a distorted perception of reality, particularly regarding the other parent's intention and actions. In the cases I have handled, the abducting parent had often, over a period of months or years, constructed an internal narrative in which the other parent was a threat. Not a difficult person, not someone they disagree with, a threat to themselves, to the children, to their sense of safety. And sometimes, in the cases that concern me most, it was connected to genuine psychiatrist instability. I have seen cases involving documented paranoia, documented episodes in which the abducting parent made accusations that were investigated by official child protection bodies and closed without findings. Accusations that were, in the clinical record, symptoms of a parent's own disorder, not description of an actual event. The children became, in those cases, the focal point of a delusional protection narrative. The abducting parent was not lying exactly, they were perceiving, and what they were perceiving was not real. The third clusters involve what's sometimes called black and white thinking, the inability to hold complex or contradictory truths simultaneously. In the context of a relationship breakdown, this produces a narrative in which the other parent is entirely bad, entirely dangerous, and entirely undeserving to access the child. There is no ambivalence, no acknowledgement of the other parent's positive role, no recognition that the child has a right to both parents, regardless of how the adults feel about each other. This rigidity is clinically significant. And it's also legally significant because it shapes every communication, every negotiation, every hearing. The parent who thinks in black and white does not compromise. They capitulate or they escalate. And in international cases, they escalate by relocating. I want to speak now to the person watching this video who has not yet experienced an abduction, but it's afraid it might happen. Because the most powerful intervention is the one that prevents the act. These are the behavioral patterns I have seen across many cases in the period leading up to an abduction. A sudden, intense interest in the child's travel documents, questions about passport renewal, requests to take the child on international trips, framed as temporary, discussion about visiting family abroad that gradually shifts in tone from a few weeks to the summer, to sometimes more open-ended. An increasing isolation of the child from the left-behind parent's family and social network. Fewer shared events, fewer visits with grandparents or friends connected to the other parent. A gradual narrowing of the child's world to the abducted parent's world. Escalating allegations, particularly in written, that the other parent is dangerous, abusive, or unfit. These allegations serve two functions simultaneously: to build a legal record, to justify the abduction afterward, and they test the emotional response of the other parent, looking for reactions that can be further weaponized. Sudden financial preparation, closing joint accounts, moving money, changing beneficiaries. In retrospective, many left-behind parents recall financial irregularities in the months before the removal that they did not connect at the time. Changes in the child's behavior and language. A child who begins expressing fear of the left-behind parent in language that does not sound like a child's language. A child who suddenly uses adult phrases about a parent's behavior. A child who seems rehearsed. This is one of the most painful warning signs because it means the process of psychological preparation has already reached the child. If you recognize more than 2 or 3 of these signs in your current situation, do not wait for it to become legally critical. Prevention is possible and in many cases straightforward. A clear legal agreement on travel restriction, a formal custody arrangement specifying habitual residence, a passport held under joint control. These tools exist precisely for this situation. I want to end by acknowledging something directly. The fathers who come to me are carrying an enormous amount alone. They are fighting a legal battle in a foreign country, in a language that might not be their own, navigating a judicial system they do not understand against a person who is using their child as a shield and a weapon simultaneously. And they are doing all of this while managing grief, shame, hypervigilance, and the specific cruelty of not knowing whether the child is okay at this exact moment. That is not a normal kind of stress. That is not something that resolves with patient or positive thinking. It requires acknowledgement, support, and a strategy, legal and psychological. In parallel, neither one sufficient without the other. If you are that father or that mother, because left-behind parents come in every form, knows this: you are not alone in this. The law recognizes what was done to you. There are mechanisms designed specifically to address it. And there are people who have fought this battle and brought their children back home. It is possible, but it starts with acting, not waiting. The link to reach my office is in the description below. Everything you share is confidential. And if this video reached someone who needed it today, share it. Because the next person who finds it may be a parent with a child who's still here. And that parent can still prevent what others could not. Thank you.